Having a hard time hanging up your jersey and moving on from the game you love? Can't really decide if you want to be a student athlete in college or not? Trust me, I've been through the same process. It's very tough, but we're here to help. Join us on our last college prep conversation presented by Body Armor as we walk you through this process with some people who've been through it. That's the topic today: to play or not to play. See you there. Yo, Sports Biz campers, welcome to our last and final college prep conversation presented by Body Armor. This is another tough decision, and one that every student athlete has to go through: deciding when to hang up your jersey and stop playing the sport you love. But fortunately, we got some great guests who are going to walk us through this process and help make your decision easier. We have Jose DeVerge, Director of Corporate Partnership at Excel Sport Management, representing some of the biggest brands in sports. And we got Olivia DeHassel, who's a high school student making the transfer to NYU to play softball in college. Before we get into this conversation, keep in the back of your mind these 3 points. Number 1, commitment. How much time and effort are you willing to put into the sport you love to play on the next level? Number 2, what's in it for you? How will playing or not playing influence your college experience? Number 3, skills. What skills will you be learning playing versus not playing that can transfer to a successful career in sports? Well, let's jump right in and hear from our guests.
My name is Olivia DeHassel. I just graduated high school in Charlotte, North Carolina. In the fall, I'll move up to Manhattan and I'll be studying at NYU for sports management as well as be playing softball.
My name is Jose DeVerge. I'm currently working for Excel Sports Management as the Senior Director of Corporate Partnerships, focusing mainly on our properties division. We represent teams, leagues, and a number of other properties across esports, the NFL, NBA, and a long list, global soccer, and a number of others. We're selling marquee assets. But as Christian had mentioned, I was fortunate enough to play college baseball specifically, and had the aspirations at the time of playing professional baseball. So if you were to ask the 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old version of Jose DeVerge, what he was going to be doing at this age, I'd probably say I was going to be a Major League Baseball player. And clearly that didn't work out, but learned a lot along the way and looking forward to sharing.
Yeah, Jose, you Major League in my eye. Like every time we hop on Zoom or just have a conversation, like you turn me up, you motivate me, and you're really inspiring. So this is going to be an amazing conversation.
Well, I'm glad. I'm going to make sure my wife hears that so that she knows somebody appreciates me.
Yes, sir. So I guess to start off the conversation, I'm going to share a video. So it's a YouTube video, basically just giving a different perspective on being a college athlete versus a non-college athlete. And then after that, we'll just basically share some takeaways we have, some thoughts on it, and then we'll dive into the meat and potatoes of our conversation.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. What can I get you?
Can I get a raspberry passion fruit watermelon rebel medium iced? Yeah.
I got almond milk, protein, strawberries, and bananas. Now I'm on my way to class. It's hella cold, bro.
Where you going? The ALS building. Where's that?
Hey, where's your class at first?
You can't go that way.
Yeah, you can, bro. Bro, I wish.
Yeah, so we're gonna stop it there. Just start off with I guess some takeaways. Like, what do you think of that video? Do you feel it was accurate, Jose, of the life of a college athlete? And I guess just some takeaways from you both.
No, I think it's extremely accurate. I'm assuming he played football. That's what it looked like based on the locker room he was in, and it looked like either can't tell whether they're in season or off season, but college athletics, when you, especially depending on the level, I played Division II college baseball, so the just as important, but the stakes aren't as high when you look at the revenue aspect of things. But being an athlete, whether you're a scholarship student athlete or not, being committed to the team, and there are coaches that are brought in, and that's their job, is to coach and win championships for that institution. So they expect their students to be prepared, their student athletes to be prepared for that, and they're there for school and education, but the teams have to work out, they have to do things to prepare for their games, and a number of different things they have to achieve throughout the year. So you're doing two jobs. You're a full-time student and you're a full-time athlete. So I thought it was very accurate.
We already know how much commitment and sacrifice it takes to be someone who performs both on the field as well as in the classroom. So do you feel like that video was pretty accurate on both the courts?
Yes, every hour of your day is filled up, and it might not be with a workout or a practice, but that like hour, 2 hours of class or hour after class is extremely important. You can't like dilly dally, because you got to have your homework done before you can go to practice. So each hour is important.
To conceptualize the whole topic, like student athlete, first I want to ask, like, in your eyes, what does it mean to be a student athlete? Like, how do you be a successful student athlete, both, like we said, in the classroom, but also on the field?
Well, I think student comes first. It's in the name, student athlete. It's not athlete student. So you have to keep your options open, and I think you'll have more if you take education seriously. And I mean, it's terrible, but if you were to get hurt and couldn't play sports again, you need to have a backup plan. Most people can't play sports forever, including the pros. They're very lucky, but they have to stop at some point too. So education is just gonna keep on helping you.
It's interesting because I'm much older than you, Olivia, and I look at just my generation, and when we were going through college, and the access to information that we had, and how much more we had than the generation prior to us. And then I look at your generation and all the information you have access to, and now it's social media playing a role, and your generation is just so much smarter, I feel like, and a lot more mature in specific areas as it relates to what your ambitions are, having an open mind, keeping your options open. Like, you're a senior in high school, right? Like, I wasn't talking like that as a senior in high school. Like I said, I was going to be a Major League Baseball player. That's what it was about. And I had to do good in school to be able to play on the field, right? Like, that was part of at least for my reality of it. So, it's purely time management. And I think you learned that very quickly. I think, being smart and having the right mentors that are going to give you exposure to what's possible out there for you. And for example, that's where sports biz camps comes into play, and why you're a part of sports biz camps, Olivia, and that you have identified you want to work in sports and you want to have a successful career in sports and you want to expose yourself to what's out there. But the next 4 years, likely 4 years, you're going to be a student athlete and making sure that your grades are up to par, but then also that you're giving yourself the best shot to hopefully go on and play, continue on your softball career after college. So there's a lot of factors that come into it, but it's to Olivia's point, every hour, I'd even say every minute counts in where you're spending your time.
What do you guys think it takes to be successful in both? Because for me, like in college, it was much easier to focus on just classwork and just getting different experiences outside of the classroom, because obviously we have more time, less time commitment with work. And obviously work takes away from your time in the classroom, which is kind of the same, but different. But I guess, like, what skills or mindset would it take to be successful?
It's interesting. I think looking back, it's ultimately coming down to your priorities, right? And I played baseball in college. We had, I think, a roster of like 25 guys on the team. And for us, I could tell you how I spent my time when we weren't on the field or weren't practicing was very different for some of the other folks, right? Everybody had their own situation. So I do think it's a very subjective approach that one has to take and identify what are your priorities. I think Olivia, in just a short time that we've been talking, I think it's pretty clear what her priorities are, right? She wants to be a great student and she wants to enjoy softball and compete. And she's also thinking about, her life after softball and preparing herself for that. So, kudos to you. And I didn't have that mindset. Like, as I mentioned, that was just my reality at the time. I played competitive baseball growing up, played on a few travel teams with some guys that are major leaguers right now. I was good enough to be on those teams and get some looks, but never signed a professional contract. But I always believed I had a shot, right? So all my free time was dedicated to baseball. And preparing for that opportunity, for the right scout coming to see me at the right time, making sure that I was ready. But I also knew that part of that was school, and I had to, have the grades to be eligible to play. Looking back, I wish I spent more time on education, frankly, and just exposing myself more to the industry and the career, because I had a winding road to get to this point, and not till like 3 years after college that I finally get a chance to work in the industry and kind of figure it out. So I kind of feel like I got a late start in comparison to some of my peers who started like right out of college and things like that. But it worked out for the best. But in terms of mindset, what are your priorities? I think that's the first question you got to ask yourself. What are your priorities, and are you investing the right amount of time to bring your vision to life?
And for you, Olivia, I guess, just building off what Jose just mentioned, what do you think your mindset is? Because like Jose said, I feel like you have a really solid grasp of what you want to do and how to achieve it, being that you've been through, I guess, sports biz camps through school and going into your collegiate career. Like, what do you think your mindset is?
I've always been told to keep my options open from my mom. And it was really good guidance, because from freshman year, I challenged myself with taking classes I might not have. I could have just slid by, but I challenged myself from freshman year on. And my mindset on the field, I'm still working on it. It's it's a lot of mental practice. So I'm currently working on it now. But it's just grind, do as much as I can, control what I can control. That's a big thing for me. In baseball, softball, you fail a lot of the time, and you do in life, but in baseball and softball, you fail 70% of the time. And it takes a lot of mental strength to do that. And I think from learning that in softball, I've translated it into my student life. So I'm just constantly, I don't know, I just learned it from a long time. It just comes with practice, I think. And I subconsciously grabbed onto it from softball.
I guess segueing to the next question, Jose. Speaking of Olivia's point, failure, like you receive, she said you go through failure 70% of the time. And in sales, which is what you do now, corporate partnerships with Excel, you see a lot of failure. So how did your playing career kind of transition you and mold you into being a successful business person when you got done?
Yeah, it's a good question. And Olivia, I hear you. I think, to Olivia's point, if you fail 70% of the time in any job, you probably suck, right? But in baseball, you're actually a Hall of Famer if you can have a full career and you were successful 3 out of 10 times, right? I think that's just a testament to just the difficulty of the game as it relates from a hitting standpoint. But for me, as I mentioned, it was about baseball and making it to the big leagues or having the opportunity to do so. I wasn't always the most talented, but anyone who has ever played with me knows that I was going to outwork anyone around me. And that was my MO. That was my reputation. Now, Jose is going to work his tail off and he's going to make sure he's doing everything he can to get better. I was very honest with myself. I knew where my strengths were. I knew where my strengths weren't. Or at least I learned what they weren't. As I got older, you start just, learning that you can't do certain things, especially when the competition level gets up and you're like, wow, you look at some of the better players that you're competing with against at your age. You start comparing yourself, and then that's how I found ways to work on my game, right? I wanted to throw like this guy, I wanted to run like this guy, I wanted to hit like this guy. And that's how I have my favorite players. And I share that narrative to say that, I literally left it all on the field. And what I found was when I stopped playing, that same approach, when I got the opportunity in sports, I transitioned that same approach to a workforce. And frankly, that's what separated me from my peers. And I feel that that's the main reason why I'm as successful. I've been able to find the success that I've been able to find. And that's just purely, again, just outworking the competition, learning, growing, asking questions, leaning on my mentors, really challenging myself. And you learn discipline as an athlete, you learn preparation, the importance of preparation, you learn mental strength, you learn how to deal with failure, you learn how to compete. Like there's so many factors. And now I'm a dad. My daughter is like 1 year old now. She literally turned 1 year old last week. And I can't wait for her to get into sports because whether she's an athlete, a professional athlete or not, great. If that happens, great, thank God. If it's not, it's all good. But I'm more excited about what she's going to learn through being an athlete and through competing. Because I just think, especially in sales, a lot of organizations, they won't say this, but they're attracted to people who played sports in college because there's just a responsibility, there's a level of tenacity that you expect at least, and there's a level of commitment and the type of person, the type of grit that you want your employees to have. So it does, when the employer sees that you played sports in college and you did great, you had good grades, and whether you were good or not, but the fact that we saw the video, you see the player's schedule, the fact that you had to handle that type of schedule and that was your lifestyle for 4 years, it's something that, employers do take notice. So I would say for me, learning all those things and on the field and transitioning them into my work life, and in other areas of my life, it was invaluable.
I want to transition to the topic of like balance. Olivia, how do you kind of balance going through the recruiting process and going through trying to find the right school and while trying to be the best student athlete that you can possibly be?
Well, I was still in the recruiting process. It took up all of my free time because I had school, softball practice, I had to prepare meals, and then I was doing all the recruiting things. And it requires a lot of social sacrifices. So I've had like friends who are not looking to play at the next level, and they're like, "Hey, come out, there's a party." I'm like, "No, I can't. I have to get ready for a camp at a college so I can get recruited." And I don't regret not going to the parties. I'm actually very happy that I am where I am. But my friends would probably think, I don't know, that I'm not doing all the regular teenage stuff. The recruiting process just took a lot of time, and for some reason, I didn't really want to stay local. So I was flying and traveling all the time too, which added on top of my schedule. And I was not home very often. So it was kind of stressful, but after all the camps, all the communication, emails, text exchanges, it was totally worth it. I found my home. It was perfect. No regrets at all.
Embrace learning, make smart decisions, keep yourself out of trouble. You're not immune to some of the things that that are going on in the world, so be attentive of that. But just embrace where you are and make sure that you're happy, and understand that every decision you make has an opportunity cost. All right, and if you decide to hang out late on Friday night, you're probably not going to be at your best at practice on Saturday, or your game at practice, or your game, excuse me, on Saturday. And if that matters to you, then shame on you for not getting the rest that you needed the night before. If that doesn't matter to you and how you show, I think that's a bigger question you need to ask yourself. But ultimately, I think that, again, as I mentioned, that it really leans into the priorities, and focusing on your priorities, and happiness is a part of balance. But keeping the main thing is always important too.
I used to think that like student athletes missed out on stuff, whether it was like experience to grow professionally, or like we said, going just experiencing college and having fun, even though that's, like you said, that's not the priority. What do you think like the competitive advantage is of playing college sports? And do you think that college athletes miss out on things that you should experience in college?
I think, yeah, you definitely miss out on certain things because, like you said, it's time, right? Like you can only be in one place at one time, and if you have to be at practice, or if you have to be working out, or whatever you have to be doing to prepare and get better, you're probably not going to get a chance to do some of the other things that non-student athletes, or just students, I should say, are doing at that time. But I would say the same thing applies in the other way around. Like I think students are missing out on some things that athletes do get access to, right? And access not just material things, but just the lessons. It's interesting because I got to a point in my career where, as I was growing and I had different job opportunities, I started looking at jobs based on what I was going to be able to, one, can I do it right now, stepping in, am I ready? And then secondly, what am I going to learn? Because that job is going to prepare me for my next job. Like I know what my North Star is and where I'm trying to get to. So every job I took, I've taken and have been very intentional about what I'm trying to learn from that job, and where I'm trying to prove myself, not only to myself, but to my peers and the industry, that I'm ready for that next thing. And as an athlete, that comes from that mindset, I feel, comes from being an athlete, right? Like I was taking 300 ground balls backhand, taking 300 ground balls front hand, taking fly balls, 500 swings a day, whatever it was, you're preparing yourself for that moment. I do think it's twofold, right? You could argue that both were missing on something, and it's all perspective, right? I really feel like it's all perspective. And if you're just in tune with yourself, and you know what you want, and you know what you're after, and look, we also got to keep in perspective these, the people like Olivia, I don't know how old you are, but most of you and your peers, the people that we're talking to in this video, you're 18 through 21 or 22 years old. Like, you're not supposed to know a lot of things. So embrace that as well. That's a part of your journey. But once you know, it's in your heart. There's a passion that you want to pursue, as a fire that you have inside of you that you want to go after. So from a balance standpoint, I just think it ultimately came down to perspective. And I think I touched on it a little bit earlier when I talked about, preparation, discipline, competition, et cetera. So the competitive advantage, and you are missing out on things, but I could say the same thing applies on the other side, with students missing out on some opportunities that athletes have.
I think my friends who don't play sports are totally missing out. I'm going to have the opportunity to travel the country and play the sport I love. And they might think, oh, she's traveling the country and playing a sport, but she's missing out on this really cool party in Manhattan. I don't think that way, but my friends probably might. Like Jose said, it's perspective. And I know I'm going to work better with softball in my life, and some other student might realize that they'll be more successful without playing a collegiate sport.
What advice would you have for someone who aspires to be a well-rounded student athlete?
I think you have to keep your options open. I've said it a few times in this conversation, but the more options you have, the more opportunities you can have, and you can choose from it, and you won't regret anything. So if you're in high school and you're like, oh, I should have taken this class so I can get into this school, but now I can't get in there. You can't regret anything if you set yourself up for success from the very beginning. So you can choose to go different paths and you'll be totally fine. I think my mom encouraged me to do a pretty good job of that. I didn't know I wanted to go to such a rigorous academic school, but I had my options open. I could have applied to a community college, got in. I could have gotten into I did get into NYU, but if I didn't set myself up from early on, I might not be able to choose where I want to go. So keep your options open. Education's really, really, really important. We can't play sports forever, sadly. I wish I could. But yeah.
I'm an example of that. You cannot play sports forever. Even if it's rec ball. But no, I think, it's interesting. I think there's a story that applies here, a story that I learned, and it's pretty well known if you Google it. There's a story that Greg Popovich used to tell, and actually a phrase that I believe they had in their locker room, throughout the locker room, and even throughout the arena, called "Pound the Rock," right? And there's a story about a stone cutter that essentially the stone cutter had this huge stone or rock in front of him, and someone's walking through the hills. I'm probably butchering the story, but the essence is someone gets to the stone cutter and the stone cutter swings it once, it cracks, swings it again, boom, the stone just falls apart. And you're thinking like, man, this stone cutter is so strong. On 2 strikes, this person was able to break the stone. And what that person didn't realize is that the stone cutter, that was like the 1 millionth hit that the 1 millionth swing that the stone cutter took, right there. The stone cutter was there for days, grinding, chipping away at that stone. And then it finally broke, right? So the point I'm bringing up that story, and then just the word of advice is buy into the process, trust the process, commit to growing, commit to learning. You're going to make mistakes. I think limiting your mistakes and minimizing those mistakes is where you can really create a gap for yourself in your development, right? Learn something once and make sure it doesn't have to have, you don't have to learn a second or third, fourth time that same lesson, and embrace the journey. It's purely perspective. And I think, this is you're preparing yourself for what's next in life. And you're going to find that approach matters everywhere. Because now, I'll say this, I'm 35 years old and I'm at a different phase in my life, but that approach has never changed, right? Like now I'm preparing for, what I'm going to be able to do for my family next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now. So your priorities may change, but the approach I find doesn't. In fact, it actually you get better at it and you refine it. So the sooner you could start, especially in college as a student athlete, the better off you'll be.
Absolutely. And Jose, you just brought up an interesting point about just the journey. So like, how did you navigate your personal journey? And I guess what in regards to Olivia specifically, being that you guys play a really similar sport, what advice would you give her as she navigates her own?
Yeah. I mean, embrace it and just try to get better. Be honest with yourself. I've been fired before. I've been promoted. I've been recruited. I've been told no. I've been told I'm not good enough. I've been told that I'm the best. What I have found is that I have always challenged myself and gone after what I wanted. And whether it worked out or not, I learned a lot about myself and I didn't get discouraged. Embrace the process, challenge yourself, make commitments, follow through on your commitments, and stick to what's important to you, right? If it's family, friends, sports, education, whatever that order is, make sure that you're investing your time across those buckets, and you're intentional with your time.
What kind of psychological space were you in when you went through that transition of like, dang, I might not be able to play anymore, and I really do have to find a career in sports? Like, how did you get through that process, and what kind of feeling did you have to overcome those feelings?
So I didn't realize that I wasn't going to play sports anymore until, the big contracts didn't come after my senior year of college. I had a few small minor league contracts. Just, these minor league teams in baseball, they have to fill rosters. So some seniors, you'll get $1,000, $5,000 to sign and give it a shot, right? So I had a few of those, but nothing worth pursuing. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was a mortgage broker at the time. So I was trying to contact people to help them with refinancing their homes. That was like, not for me. And then I ended up doing door-to-door sales. I was literally knocking on, I was just trying to, it was hard to find a job. I ended up finding a job through LinkedIn. I was doing door-to-door sales, trying to convince people to change their electricity provider. So I would knock on your house, Christian, find who your mom is, and then get her to talk to me about her bill, and then I try to figure out how I could save her money. Or I was doing that with businesses, right? Who's the general manager? Who's the owner? And I laugh at it now, but like I learned so much during that experience. But my point in sharing that is that I didn't know I was going to work in sports. It just so happened that I made an impression on a college professor at the time, and she liked me enough, and she just randomly called me. And like I remember, I was like going from one property to one commercial, one business to the next, like while I'm working in like Jamaica, Queens, in a suit, and it's hot as hell outside. And she's like, "Hey, Jose, we have an intern that worked at the Jets. She's looking for we have an alum that works at the Jets. They're looking for an intern. Are you interested?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'm interested." I happened to do my thing in the interview, but that was my exposure to the industry. And I saw what I saw, and I was like, this is what I want to do, right? And I need to figure out how to get in here. And then that's kind of when I went on my journey. But I knew, like, that, I talk about that fire, that passion, like at that moment, I knew this was it. And I just decided to attack it, and just, like I said, made a lot of mistakes, met some great people, learned a lot of lessons, and was able to find some success. And now here I am, right? So I would say just sticking with it, man. You got to believe in yourself, and you got to attack. You have to attack your goals. I come from a rough area in Brooklyn, and the saying we have growing up is a closed mouth will never get fed. So you gotta be willing to work and chase your goals.
I want to get Olivia's perspective, like knowing Jose's perspective. What do you want your career to look like when you have to hang up your cleats?
So I've thought about this actually quite a lot since sports biz, and I've accepted that I will have to stop playing personally, but I enjoy coaching quite a bit. And I think I'll always be involved in softball if I'm just coaching, if I'm working with USA softball. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm always going to stay connected in softball. I'll find a way. And then from a young age, I've always just been invested in sports. I every Sunday I'd watch college football, or I'd watch professional football with my grandfather, and we just like yell at the TV. And I probably knew at like the age of 8 that I love sports, even if I'm not the one playing it. And after finding you guys last summer, I was like, oh, this can actually happen. I could stay in sports, and I could have a job I love in the industry I love, and be connected with any sport. I don't really have a preference. Yeah, it's just a way of life for me. I can only function if I have sports in my life. And you guys taught me a whole bunch about that last summer. So thank you.
Before we leave, I just want to, what is your biggest takeaway from this conversation? And I guess something that you would recommend that students do after this conversation?
I think if you're a student athlete, you need to write down the order of your priorities. You got to figure it out and be honest with yourself. If you think sports will be in it and they actually wind up not, after thinking about the other things that are important to you, it's okay. No one's going to be mad at you for choosing a different path than what you originally thought.
It's interesting. I'm speaking from the perspective of the person that went through college already, but I've already learned a lot from you and Olivia on this call, and just from your perspectives, right? And it makes me just think about my daughter and things that, lessons I want to teach her. So I would just reiterate what I was saying, and just attack your goals. As Olivia mentioned, what are your priorities? It's always going to come down to perspective. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to have a understanding of what you're chasing, so that you can feel fulfilled and purpose, right? Like you're doing things with a purpose. I do find like when people are just doing things just to do them, they usually never end well, or people don't feel fulfilled, right? And the reality is you're not going to control everything in your life, and I think that's not the point. But just make sure that you're prepared, and make sure that you're intentional with your time.
Wow, another great conversation from Olivia and Jose. It was a home run if I do say so myself. So here are my 3 takeaways. Number 1, sacrifice. You have to be truly committed to succeeding on and off the court. There are going to be late nights and early mornings, but that's the price you pay when you're doing something you love. Number 2, you get the best of both worlds. You get to compete on the next level while getting a higher education. Who could ask for a better experience? Number 3, playing sports builds some of the strongest characteristics. Grit, determination, relentlessness, and the ability to overcome adversity are just 3 of the lifelong skills that'll help you be successful. Yo, Sports Biz Campers, that is a wrap. I appreciate y'all for taking this journey with me on the College Prep Conversations presented by Body Armor. So much great insight given and so much learned along the way. Make sure you leave us feedback and tell us what was most beneficial to you and your situation. Thank you to all the amazing guests who gave this valuable insight. Thank you to Body Armor, our presenting partner. And make sure you take all the information that you were given and apply it to the Career Exploration Camp coming up July 13th and the 15th and July 20th and the 22nd. With that, I'll leave you. Follow us on all socials at Sports Biz Camps, and I will see y'all at the Career Exploration Camp.